RealAgriculture.com's coverage of Cropweek in Saskatoon is brought to you by FarmLink Marketing Solutions, BioVision Seed Labs, the Canadian Wheat Board, and High Stick NT.
In terms of prices, we're quite optimistic for this upcoming year. Some of the world weather events that have happened since last year's conference certainly have turned the market situation around, and for wheat, durum, and barley, that's no exception. Prices are expected to remain strong, and certainly there are some supply concerns for each of the commodities that are coming up that perhaps could even cause prices to increase even more. So it's a situation much like we were facing 2-3 years ago, when prices for most of the commodities are good and farmers are going to have many options of planting this year if we can get the crop in the ground. For durum, it's a particular situation this year where we think in the upcoming year, in fact in the upcoming months, where durum had been trading at discounts to spring wheat internationally, that it's now going to appreciate back to a premium just because of the fact that supplies have tightened down, and lower area in Europe in the upcoming year, which has already been planted. And although conditions look good in North Africa, their import demand still will be there to some extent, at least anyway. As well, with our quality problems that we've had here in Western Canada, some of the quality problems that they've had in the US, there is very, very tight supplies of high quality durum, and that you really have to wait until next October for that to solve itself. So certainly we're looking at stronger durum prices going forward here and into next year. Most certainly, with some of the areas that didn't get planted, certainly farmers lost revenue from those areas, and they're going to be looking at this as a make-up year. And fortunately, the prices have improved, I guess partially because we did have problems last year, as well as problems in Russia and Australia and other parts of the globe. But this certainly does present an opportunity. Having said that, again, we certainly don't know what the spring's going to bring us in terms of planting conditions. And although you like to be optimistic, certainly there are going to be some challenges coming up in the spring season here.
Yeah, the snowpack is an issue right now, I guess, as well.
The snowpack, but I think more importantly is the amount of moisture that we had going into the winter freeze-up. On the eastern half of the prairie region, we have near record or record river flows that are occurring right now. That means the groundwater is very, very high. And certainly with the additional snow, that means that we're going to have difficulty this spring in moving all that water in the spring melt. Again, we would like to see a nice dry start to the spring with warmer weather so that we can start to dry up some of the wet areas of the prairie region. Well, I think most commodities are going to see an increase because we lost so much acreage last year that if we can plant even a portion of that acreage that we lost, we're going to see an increase. So we see increases for most of the commodities out there. In terms of wheat, yes, we do see an increase for wheat. We see an increase both for wheat and durum. And barley area is up a little bit, we figure, but not as much as for wheat and durum. But that's going to be highly dependent on the spring conditions, because the spring conditions are going to dictate a lot of what kind of planting choices that we have in certain areas.
Do you get the sense, though, that farmers are looking at wheat because it's a more familiar crop and they're looking for maybe more of a safe bet, considering the prices are pretty good?
I think that's one of the factors. Certainly, if you're looking at price alone, some of the oil seeds, even some of the special crops are better in terms of return, but in terms of the cereal crops, wheat prices are very strong compared to history, at least anyway, and so we expect there'll be an additional acreage. But again, part of this is just about reclaiming the acreage that we lost last year. And if we can get to that point, that would be very good if we could get all the area that farmers would normally intend to plant back into the ground. They range, but it's about $100 a ton to $150 a ton on the international market, but it depends a lot on what grade and quality that you're talking about. Both the lower and higher quality grades prices have moved up, but especially for high protein, high quality milling wheat, those prices are very, very high right now relative to some of the lower grades for wheat. Having said that, the lower grade prices for wheat are still very good, and in fact, if you look at, I think, our current pros, a little bit better than they were for the previous year for high quality wheat.
How much upside is there from here, Bruce?
That's a hard question to answer. Certainly the fundamentals right now dictate that we're not going to move back to the levels that we saw a couple of years ago. But having said that, we have to watch the weather globally very, very carefully, because the stocks of wheat, corn, soybeans, oilseeds in general are all declining, and if we don't see production picking up to the extent that people are expecting, then certainly you can see higher prices come and challenge those levels that we saw 2-3 years ago.
Your first pool return outlook will be end of February for the new crop year. Would it be safe to assume that the new crop PRO will be better than what we're seeing for the PRO for the current crop year overall?
Well, again, that's a hard question to answer, but more or less yes, because we do have higher prices right now than we did at the beginning of the marketing year back at the beginning of August. And again, a lot of this does depend on future weather events and future production that's happening globally in terms of how long the prices stay high or if they appreciate even further. Oh, most certainly, it could be a very, very good year if we have a good crop, and I could pick a number of countries that wouldn't have a good crop, and then it would be a wonderful opportunity. But again, it's looking a lot better than it did last year at this time. I think that's one of the things. The only problem is, again, the spring season does cause a lot of concern because of the excess moisture that we have, especially on the eastern half of the prairies.